The waiting space is where your wants quietly die. And most of us don't even notice the funeral. Hello, 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 and welcome to More Than Money, a podcast where we have nuanced conversations about money, business, and life, where we take the time to explore the human side of money because success with money is never just about the numbers. I'm your host, Jacquette Timmons, and whether this is your very first episode or you are joining me for another, I am really, really glad that you have chosen to spend some time with me today. So let's get into it. Look, I'm on your screen or in your ear, and maybe you can hear my smile if you're just listening. And I'm in really good spirits. But y'all, I gotta tell you, I am tired. And I can't quite discern if this is just a matter of physical exhaustion, emotional exhaustion, or maybe a little bit of both. But I've reached that point in the week, the end of the week, and I am just tapped out. Now, I could wallow and I could travel down the deep woes me road, you know? However, the truth is, a lot of people are exhausted right now, right along with me. And I mean, come on, the state of the world is enough to tire anyone out. But I am paying attention to a pattern that I suspect doesn't just affect me. I can start to feel like I am crashing and really need a long nap right before the thing I said I wanted is about to come to fruition. Can you relate? I find the timing of that quite interesting because, in my experience, the fatigue sets in after I have just been like head down, immersed in the deep work of whatever it was that I needed to do my part in bringing what I said I wanted to fruition. So then, after you do all of that, you have to wait, right? Then comes the wait. And first, there's the wait between figuring out what it is that you want and then asking for it. And then this is followed by the wait of then actually getting what you want. I call the gap between wanting and asking and getting, and then clearly the gap between wanting and getting. I call that the waiting space. And it can be tricky to navigate because that is where a lot of things start to bubble up. It's where courage sits next to fear. It's where confidence sits next to self doubt. It's where conviction sits next to anxiety. And here's the thing, if you don't have a way to navigate what bubbles up, you may abandon the want or shrink it before you even ask. Or you give up too soon and you don't follow through if what it is that you want doesn't materialize according to your timeline. And this is why I say the waiting space is where wants quietly die, and most of us don't even notice the funeral. So, what do you and I do in this waiting space? Well, most of us do one of three things. None of them serve us. One thing that we do is we rush it. We rush it by confusing motion with progress or by busying ourselves into a version of the want that perhaps is smaller, that perhaps feels safer, or that is perhaps faster to reach. So, hello again to the pitfall that I mentioned in the last episode about confusing any action with being the right action. So, that's one way we rush it. The other way is we stall it. And this is sneaky because we stall it by doing a little bit more research, by doing even more planning, by doing even more preparation, by refining, by doing everything except asking. And it can get tricky because all of those things that I've just ticked off can look like productivity. And productivity can become the most sophisticated form of avoidance. And the third thing is we abandon it. We quietly, decide that what we want, it wasn't really all that important after all. Or perhaps it wasn't realistic in the first place, or just simply wasn't for us. And we rewrite the story so that the unasked question feels like a choice rather than a cost. And here's where the cost of the unasked starts to compound. And if you've missed last week's episode, which I've already referenced, you really should go back and check it out once you've finished listening to today's episode. Because every want, like I said, quietly dies in the waiting space. But in that waiting space, it teaches you something about yourself. And what it teaches you is usually the wrong thing. And so here's what I mean by that. It teaches you that your wants aren't worth the discomfort of asking. It teaches you that the waiting itself is a sign that maybe you should turn back. It teaches you that fatigue is a verdict instead of a feature of the terrain. And it's not, right? The exhaustion that I described at the start of this episode, I really have come to understand it more as a signal and not as a stop sign. And what happens is that it often shows up right before the breakthrough, not because something is wrong, but because something is about to shift. So the waiting space asks something of you, and that something is rarely, if ever, comfortable. So this week, I want to invite you to notice your own waiting space and notice it without needing to try to fix it. Notice it without needing to try to rush through it. Just notice. And notice, and then in the process of noticing, ask yourself, what are you currently waiting on? Between the wanting and the asking, or between the asking and the getting. Ask yourself or notice what's bubbling up for you in that gap, the waiting space. And what might it cost you if you don't tend to what's bubbling up? Because here's what I'm sitting with as I close out my little tired week here. And that is that the waiting space isn't the obstacle to what you want. It's the territory where what you want and ask for gets decided. And the question is whether you will stay in it long enough to find out. Today's episode is another short one, and so that is a wrap for us today, folks. As always, I thank you so much for listening, or maybe even watching if you've joined us over there on YouTube. And if you've liked this episode, or you are enjoying this series, or you like this podcast overall, please do me a favor and leave a rating and a review from whatever platform you happen to be listening from. But if you are listening from Apple Podcasts, please take a moment to leave a rating and a review because it helps us with the algorithm. And also please share it with those in your circle so that we can reach more people than we ever could on our efforts alone. And if you happen to be joining me on YouTube, thank you for that too. Subscribe to the channel so you'll never miss another episode, and also leave a comment so we can get to know one another. And like I've said previously, it's summer and I really, really do enjoy me a dirty chai iced latte with some oat. So if you'd like to buy me a coffee, you can go to buymeacoffee.com/Jaquette, buymeacoffee.com/Jaquette. Thanks again for listening or watching. I will be back with another episode, and I hope that you will too. Until then, remember, it's about more than money.